I walked into my sister's wedding smiling, believing I was part of the celebration, until someone quietly pointed me toward a chair in the hallway, not inside the hall, not with family, in the hallway, beside passing strangers and closed doors. I told myself it didn't matter. It's her big day, I kept thinking. But as laughter and music echoed from inside, I sat alone, watching guests walk past me without a second glance. Minutes felt like hours. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. That's when I realized something painful. I wasn't just misplaced, I was forgotten. So I stood up. I didn't argue, I didn't explain, I simply walked out. I thought no one would notice. I was wrong. Within moments, the celebration stopped, whispers spread, and faces turned pale. My phone started ringing non-stop. What happened after I left didn't just shock my family, it changed how they saw me forever. I arrived at the wedding venue earlier than most guests, wanting everything to be perfect for my sister. The lights were bright, the flowers were fresh, and the hall buzzed with excitement. I adjusted my clothes, took a deep breath, and reminded myself to stay calm and happy. This was her day, after all. I didn't expect special treatment. I just expected to belong. As guests slowly filled the hall, a relative I barely spoke to approached me with a polite but uncomfortable smile. She lowered her voice and said the seating inside was almost full and that I should sit in the hallway for a while. I hesitated, glancing inside. I could see several empty chairs, but I didn't argue. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it didn't mean anything. The hallway was narrow and strangely quiet compared to the joyful noise inside. People passed by, some rushing, some laughing, none stopping. I sat on the chair placed near the wall, holding my phone so I looked busy, so no one would notice how awkward it felt. Every few seconds I could hear claps, cheers, and music bursting from the hall, reminding me exactly where I wasn't. Minutes passed, then more guests arrived. I watched them being guided inside, friends, distant relatives, even people I had never met before. Each time the door opened, hope flickered inside me. Maybe now they'll call me in. But the door kept closing without me. The hope slowly turned into embarrassment, and the embarrassment into a quiet pain I couldn't explain. What hurt the most wasn't the seat, it was the silence. No one came to check on me. No one asked if I was okay or if I needed anything. I realized that sitting there wasn't an accident. It was a decision someone made, assuming I wouldn't protest, assuming I would stay quiet like I always did. I thought about all the times I had ignored small insults to keep the peace, all the moments I stayed silent to avoid drama. Sitting in that hallway, those memories came rushing back, stacking on top of each other until my chest felt tight. I wasn't angry, I was tired of shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I looked down at my phone, then around the empty hallway. In that moment, something changed inside me. I understood that respect isn't always taken from you loudly. Sometimes it's quietly removed while you're expected to smile and accept it. And as the wedding music grew louder inside the hall, the silence around me became impossible to ignore. I stayed seated in that hallway longer than I should have. At first, I kept convincing myself it was only temporary. They'll call me in any moment, I thought. I adjusted my posture, fixed my expression, and practiced looking unbothered. I didn't want anyone to think I was upset, even though my hands had started to feel cold and my heart felt heavier with every passing minute. People walked by, some carrying trays, some laughing loudly as they headed into the hall. A few glanced at me and quickly looked away. That hurt more than being ignored completely. It felt like everyone could sense that I didn't belong there, yet no one questioned it. I realized how easy it is for people to accept unfairness when it doesn't inconvenience them. I opened my phone and pretended to scroll, but I wasn't reading anything. My mind was loud. I kept replaying the moment I was asked to sit outside, the casual tone, the assumption that I wouldn't object. And the worst part was that they were right. I hadn't objected. I had smiled and agreed, just like I always did. That's when a quiet but firm thought formed in my mind. If I stay here, I'm agreeing with how I'm being treated. The idea scared me. Standing up for myself always had. I had been taught that keeping peace was more important than speaking up, that family gatherings weren't the place for feelings. But sitting there, invisible and alone, I felt something deeper than fear. I felt self-respect slipping away. I stood up slowly, no dramatic gestures, no angry words, just a calm decision. I took one last look at the hall doors, hearing the music and laughter spilling out. That sound no longer felt inviting. It felt distant, like it belonged to a world I wasn't part of at that moment. As I walked toward the exit, my steps felt heavy but certain. With each step, the pressure in my chest eased slightly. I wasn't walking away from my sister's wedding, I was walking toward myself. Toward the version of me that no longer wanted to beg for a seat at the table. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. I paused for a moment, letting myself breathe. For the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I didn't know what would happen next, and I wasn't sure if anyone would even notice I was gone. But one thing was clear. Staying silent had hurt me more than leaving ever could. I walked away from the venue not in anger, but in clarity. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with words, it's made by knowing when to leave. I had barely reached the other side of the street when my phone vibrated in my hand. At first, I ignored it. I needed a moment of quiet, a moment where no one expected anything from me. But then it buzzed again and again. When I finally looked at the screen, I saw missed calls piling up, names I hadn't expected to hear from at all. Inside the hall, my absence had been noticed. Not immediately, but suddenly. Someone asked why the hallway chair was empty. Another person wondered where I had gone. What started as a simple question quickly turned into a wave of confusion. People began looking around, realizing that the person who had quietly accepted being pushed aside was no longer there. My cousin was the first to call. Her voice sounded nervous. "Did you leave?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I didn't feel like explaining myself. Moments later, my mother called, then an uncle, then another cousin. Each call carried a sense of urgency that hadn't existed before. It was strange how silence only becomes a problem once it disappears. Inside the wedding hall, the mood shifted, the music continued playing, but the energy wasn't the same. Guests whispered to one another, some looked toward the hallway, others toward the entrance. A few people started asking uncomfortable questions. Who told me to sit outside and why? The celebration slowed, interrupted by an unease no one could ignore. My sister noticed something was wrong when she saw people gathering in small groups, talking instead of smiling. Someone leaned in and told her I had left. Her face changed instantly, shock, confusion, then hurt. She hadn't known. No one had thought it was important enough to tell her. My phone rang again. This time it was her. I hesitated before answering. When I did, I could hear the noise of the hall behind her, but her voice trembled. "Why did you leave?" she asked. I didn't accuse, I didn't shout. I simply told her the truth. Where I had been seated, how long I had waited, and how small it made me feel. There was a long pause on the line. Then her voice broke. Inside the hall, people were watching her now, the bride standing still, holding her phone, tears forming in her eyes. The music faded into the background. Someone reached for the sound system, lowering the volume as attention shifted away from the celebration and toward the reality everyone had ignored. What shocked everyone wasn't that I had left, it was the reason why. The fact that something so quietly cruel had been allowed to happen without question. My absence had done what my silence never could. It forced people to see what they were comfortable overlooking. And in that moment, far from the hall, I realized something powerful. Sometimes walking away doesn't end the story. It finally makes it begin. My sister came outside a few minutes later, still in her wedding dress, her eyes red and confused. The noise from the hall followed her briefly before the doors closed again, leaving us in an awkward silence. Seeing her like that made my heart ache. This was never what I wanted for her day. But now that I was gone, the truth had started to surface, and it couldn't be pushed back inside. She asked me directly where I had been sitting. When I told her, she looked genuinely shocked. She kept shaking her head, saying she never approved that and would never have done that to me. That was the moment everyone inside began realizing something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding caused by lack of space. It was a decision made by someone else, without care, and without considering how it would feel. Inside the hall, voices rose. Relatives started pointing fingers. One person blamed another. Someone said they thought I wouldn't mind. That sentence traveled fast, and when it reached my sister, it made her cry harder. Wouldn't mind. As if being overlooked was part of my personality. As if my silence in the past had given permission for disrespect. Guests who had been laughing minutes earlier now looked uncomfortable. Some avoided eye contact. Others suddenly felt the need to explain themselves, saying they didn't know, saying they assumed it was handled properly. The celebration had completely lost its rhythm. The truth had created a pause no decoration or music could fix. My sister apologized again and again, holding my hands, telling me to come back inside. She said a proper seat was waiting for me now, right near the front. But by then, the issue wasn't the chair. It was the realization that I had been easy to overlook because I never made things difficult for anyone. I told her I loved her and that I understood it wasn't her fault. But I also told her how it felt. To sit outside while strangers were welcomed in, to hear laughter from a place I wasn't allowed to enter. Saying those words out loud felt heavy, but freeing. For the first time, I wasn't protecting everyone else's comfort at the cost of my own. Inside the hall, people listened as my sister spoke up. Some faces dropped in shame. Others stayed quiet. No one laughed anymore. The truth had changed the mood, and there was no going back to pretending everything was perfect. That day taught everyone a lesson, but it taught me the most important one of all. Being kind and quiet should never mean being invisible. And sometimes the truth only comes out when you refuse to stay where you're being ignored. Everyone assumed that once the truth came out, I would walk back into the hall and take the seat they had suddenly prepared for me. The chair was there now, near the front, decorated, impossible to miss. It was everything I had been denied earlier. But standing there outside the venue, I realized how little that seat mattered anymore. My sister looked at me with hope in her eyes, waiting for me to say yes. Guests stood watching through the glass doors, their expressions mixed with guilt, curiosity, and embarrassment. For the first time that night, all attention was on me. The same people who hadn't noticed me in the hallway were now waiting for my decision. I smiled softly and told my sister I was happy for her, truly. I hugged her carefully, making sure not to crease her dress. Then I said something no one expected. I wasn't coming back inside, not out of anger, not to punish anyone, but because I had already made my choice. I explained that respect offered only after embarrassment isn't the same as respect given freely. Sitting in that front row chair now would mean pretending the earlier moment didn't matter. And it did matter. It mattered more than anyone realized. That hallway seat had shown me how easily people can overlook someone who never complains. A heavy silence followed. Some guests looked down. Others nodded slowly, as if they understood for the first time. No one argued with me. There was nothing left to defend. The moment had passed. I wished my sister happiness, told her to enjoy the rest of her day, and walked away. Each step felt lighter than the last. I wasn't walking away from family. I was walking away from a version of myself that accepted being treated as an afterthought. Later that night, messages poured in, apologies, explanations, promises to do better. I read them calmly, without bitterness. The point had already been made, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. That wedding became a story people still talk about, not because of the decorations or the food, but because of one quiet moment that changed everything. And for me, it marked the beginning of something new. I learned that knowing your worth sometimes means choosing absence over acceptance. And when you do, people finally see you. Not because you stayed, but because you left.